that day after day, those of us who oppose the war, among many other things, would be holding national press conferences that you never saw. I can tell you, as you know, that hundreds of thousands of people in our country were so disgusted with the media simply acting as a megaphone for the president that they turned off American media and they went to the BBC or the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Amy Goodman.
In terms of the war in Iraq, the American media failed and failed grotesquely in exposing the dishonest and misleading assertions of the Bush administration in the lead up to that war. And they are as responsible as is President Bush for the disaster that now befalls us. Media plays a role in the disintegration of Iraq, the death of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, over 3,000 Americans, the cost of hundreds of billions of dollars out of our pockets, directly related to the failure of the media. Let me touch on another issue, an issue that I am deeply involved in. If you were to ask me what the most significant untold story of our time is in terms of domestic politics, I would tell you very simply that that story happens to be the collapse of the American middle class. Simply stated, I don't want to speak at great length on it, but simply stated, despite an explosion of technology, huge increase in worker productivity, tens of millions of our fellow Americans have seen a decline in their real wages and are working longer hours for lower wages. In fact, what you probably don't know is that the working people in our country work longer hours than do the working people in any other industrialized nation on earth. How did that happen? How did it happen today that a two-income family has less disposable income than a one-income family did 30 years ago? How does it happen that 30 years ago, one person working 40 hours a week could earn enough money to take care of the family? Now you need two, and they're still not doing it. Now, one might think that this is an interesting story. One might think that globalization and disastrous trade policies, which have lowered the standard of living of millions of American workers, might be a story that should be covered.
One would think.
What I can tell you is that when NAFTA was first passed over 10 years ago, and I strongly opposed NAFTA, we did some research. We did some research. We went through the editorial pages of every major newspaper in America. Every single one of them was pro-NAFTA, and today, despite a $600 billion trade deficit, the loss of millions of good-paying blue-collar and white-collar jobs, these corporate titans are still in favor of unfettered free trade, despite the disastrous impact it has had on America's workers. Now, what is all of this about? What happens if the reality of working people's lives are not reflected in the TV, in the newspapers? What happens? This is what happens. People lose their jobs because corporations shut down. Just had an instance in Vermont this week. 175 workers shut down, lost their jobs because of free trade. People working long hours, people working for lower wages. They turn on the television set, they do not see that reality. What they see is The issue is personal responsibility. You can't afford health care? You're losing your pension? Then the problem is with you, work a little bit harder. It is not a systemic problem. It is not a problem that can be solved by government. It is not a problem which asks you to be involved in the political process. You are the only person who can't find a job that pays you a living wage. That's your fault. And you are the only person who can't find a job that provides you with health care. That's your fault. And you're the only father who can't afford to send your kid to college. That's your fault. Don't get involved in the political process. It won't do any good. So people turn on the television, they are hurting, they're exhausted. They do not see a reflection of their reality in the media. They do not understand that participation in the political process can bring about change, and that is not by accident. When we wake up in the morning and we brush our teeth, for better or worse, we see our own reflections in the mirror. When we turn on the television, somebody is providing us a mirror to the world. And what we want is that mirror to reflect the reality of ordinary people and not the illusions of a few. Talk about health care.
Please.
We are told that it is quite amazing. After 16 years in the Congress, you hear these guys getting up on the floor and us, we have the best health care system in the world. Yeah. 47 million Americans have no health insurance, even more are underinsured. We pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Costs are soaring. Best health care system in the world. But you know, go out on the street and ask people how many major countries in the world do not have a national health care program which guarantees health care to all people. And you know what? Most people do not know, because they have not seen it reflected in the media, that the United States of America is the only nation on earth that does not guarantee health care to all of its people. They do not know about the healthcare systems in Scandinavia. They do not know about European healthcare systems. And the only thing they will hear about the Canadian healthcare system are the problems that that system has. That's what they will hear. I can remember in the early 1990s, during the early years of the Clinton administration, there was a lot of debate about the need for real healthcare reform. Do you happen to know which piece of legislation in the House had far more support than any other concept? You probably don't. It was legislation to support a single-payer national health care system. That's a fact. But, as somebody who was involved in that fight, we would turn on the television and say, hey, single-payer has more support than any other concept. Are you going to talk about single-payer? Oh, no, we don't talk about single-payer. It's not feasible. Virtually no coverage about what a single-payer concept is about. Virtually no coverage about international health care and how other countries are doing a better job than we are doing. In terms of the environment, if we are told over and over again that there is a serious scientific debate about the causation of global warming, or whether global warming actually exists, it has an impact upon our consciousness. Why should we break our dependency on fossil fuels? Why should we move to sustainable energy if there is a debate among the scientific community? And that is in fact what you hear in the media. Well, you know what? There is no debate among the scientific community.